Good morning. My name is Senior Airman Jarvis Cobb, and I am representing the United States Air Force. I operate in Sydney, Australia, delivering DoD mail to U.S. assets within the Pacific. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
Off duty, this logistics airman for the US Department of Defence, or DoD, loved to sing.
Ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
But when he wasn't belting out tunes, Australian police were watching him at work.
I work with a team of 8 other Americans, and we work with Customs, Border Patrol, and quarantine agencies on a daily basis to make sure all of our mail complies with the standards.
One of those Americans was US Airman Christopher Paul. Both Paul and Cobb are now facing charges, alleged to have been recruited by one of Australia's most notorious criminal syndicates to help smuggle tobacco. 730 first reported on that syndicate led by Mohammed Jomar 4 years ago.
He's had those very close-knit connections, the middleman at the wharves, at the customs, at other places.
Mohammed Jomar was sentenced in 2013 to 7 years jail for drug trafficking. Tonight we reveal how Jomar's arrest did not slow his syndicate's operations. Instead, the group has allegedly pulled off an even more audacious infiltration of Australia's border security.
The fact is, we will have more cases of illicit behaviour at the ports and more importations the longer we continue to maintain the system as it is and not put the appropriate effort into toughening it up a bit.
The movement of huge amounts of freight through the nation's ports is facilitated by licensed customs brokers who smooth the way for importers to meet customs requirements. Several years ago, an alleged member of the Jomar syndicate was given a federal government customs broking licence and access to sensitive and secure areas of the waterfront. This was despite the fact that this man, who we'll call the Insider, was suspected by police to be a smuggling syndicate member.
We need to have some surety that the maritime ports and the airports have a regime which makes it extremely difficult for people with organised crime links to be operating in privileged positions.
In 2012, the Insider got a job with Cube Logistics, a company with the Australian Borderforce contract to move containers to this secure facility to be searched. For a criminal syndicate, this was potentially like striking gold.
If you know such things as scheduling, which containers, where they'll be, that your job is made as an organised crime identity that much easier if you have somebody on the inside who can tell you where to search, where to pick it up, when not to pick it up.
Late last year, police caught up with the Insider, an operation codenamed Minium. He and several other alleged members of the Jomar syndicate were charged with tobacco smuggling offences, along with the US Airmen.
This has been a really good result for law enforcement, working with the partner agencies to target vulnerabilities on the waterfront.
It was a successful operation, but it almost came unstuck. The Jomar syndicate learned it had been infiltrated by an undercover officer. The undercover policeman managed to convince the syndicate that this wasn't true, but it raised the question, did someone tip off the Jomars they were being watched by police? If there was a tip-off, it's not known where it came from. But Underworld and police sources have told 730 that around 10 customs officers have formed improper ties with drug and tobacco importers, including the Jomar syndicate in Sydney and Melbourne.
We will always have integrity challenges, whether it's with migration officers or customs officers or the civilian staff that support them, the administrative staff, the IT staff, because those positions present a particular attraction to hostile elements, whether it's organised crime groups or terrorist groups, to basically cause harm.
The infiltration of criminals into the customs service was exposed dramatically by 7:30 in 2012, when over a dozen corrupt customs officials were linked to a drug smuggling ring at Sydney Airport. The scandal prompted then Home Affairs Minister Jason Clare to set up a customs reform board to oversee a root and branch overhaul of the service.
There's always the risk that our law enforcement officers could end up working for the crooks. And where that happens, you've got to hunt them down and weed them out.
We're talking about crime that's organised on an international and a national level. And there is much to be gained in gaining knowledge from law enforcement officers, and that's readily available. And unfortunately, history would record that some officers succumb to that level of temptation.
Former New South Wales Police Chief Commissioner Ken Moroney was a director on the Customs Reform Board and has never spoken publicly until tonight.
Without going to the detail of confidential briefings that were provided to the board at that time, Port Botany, and I think it would apply to Sydney, to Melbourne, to Brisbane and every other major port, was simply the opportunity to engage with customs officers in inappropriate conduct and behaviour.
But the board's reform process was short-lived. In September 2013, it was scrapped by the new minister, Scott Morrison.
When the board was folded, did you have much more work to do?
Oh, clearly our first report, our first and only report, identified that there was much more to be achieved.
What's the cost of scrapping the board?
Well, I suppose the ultimate cost must be an escalation or an increase in corrupt activity. The escalation of an increasing level of influence by criminal gangs, organised crime.
The agency left to lead the fight against border security corruption has been likened to a mouse chasing dragons. The Australian Commission for Law Enforcement Integrity has a budget of just $11 million and is forced to partner with the agencies it oversees to do its vital work. The government insists this is an effective way to combat corruption. But some experts say the watchdog's reliance on other agencies' resources is far from ideal.
It poses some very serious questions about how adequately the agency is doing its job. Doubtless, it is very committed to doing its job, but you need more than a personal commitment, an organisational commitment. You've got to have the resources, physical, human and financial, to do your job effectively.
I chose this job because I love to travel and I wanted to serve my country.
The US airmen allegedly caught up in the smuggling syndicate are now facing criminal charges in the New South Wales courts.
Cheers, mate.
The Jomar syndicate has taken a hit, but will likely reform. The Australian Borderforce, which took over customs last year, says it has successfully overhauled its integrity systems. It says all of the unresolved allegations detailed by 730 were identified by its own investigators. 730 understands some customs officers are yet to be brought to account.
If an organised crime group is prepared to move a very large, multi-million-dollar shipment of drugs in and corrupt government officials to achieve that end, are they going to stop about the prospect of importing explosives or weapons in? No, they're not. We're not talking about a moral compass here because it doesn't exist.
It's the loss of community confidence and assurance that the community look for. There is no price on that.